I remember when I was in my high school economics class and my teacher started lecturing on the law of diminishing returns. He used an example of pizza, saying that the first slice of pizza is great, and maybe the second one is as well, but the more slices you ate, the less delicious that slice of pizza would be. And for some reason, that stuck with me 15 years later. In a lot of ways, the PlayStation 5 launch title, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, is that second slice of pizza. It's great, just as good, if not better than the first slice, but we are reaching the point of diminishing returns. The game picks up with the titular character Miles Morales swinging through the streets of Manhattan, specifically Harlem, with his new buddy Peter Parker. The two Spideys are back with that lovely banter we saw from the later parts of 2018 Spider-Man. Unfortunately, just as trouble arises, Peter, like many of my fellow New Yorkers, leaves the frozen streets of Manhattan for a vacation, and thus Miles' reign over New York City begins. For a game like this, I'd rather not give away any of the story beats from the roughly 10 to 15 hour main campaign. At the end of the day, this is a story about Miles trying to fill the shoes of Peter Parker and find his own place in the world. There's a scene at the start of the game where Miles is walking home when he passes by a man painting a mural of Spider-Man on the side of a wall. In that jovial Miles way, he says that one day they might include him in that mural. It reminded me of when Kobe Bryant came to the NBA trying to fill the massive void of Michael Jordan. How do you find your own path? Does Miles have what it takes to fill Peter's shoes? What is so brilliant about this game is that you feel the weight of that responsibility from start to finish. Moment to moment, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales plays, looks, and feels almost identical to the 2018 game. I'm reviewing this on the PlayStation 5, and although it's definitely crisper with some nice extra detail, the majority of Miles Morales feels like what we got in 2018. That's to say, it's still a beautiful game. There are two specific modes you can play Miles Morales in on the PlayStation 5. There's the Fidelity mode, which offers 4K at 30 FPS with ray tracing and other graphical features. Then there's the Performance mode, which bumps the frame rate up to 60 frames per second and turns ray tracing off along with some of the other graphical flourishes. In a perfect world, you wouldn't have to choose, but both options look great. I preferred the Fidelity mode, but will say seeing Miles fly through the city at 60 FPS was glorious. Either way, this is still a beautiful game that's greatly improved by Insomniac's great artistic style. Miles Morales takes place on the exact same map as the 2018 game, albeit this time in a massive snowstorm. I've lived in New York City for a couple of years now, and I've never seen such a massive and consistent snowstorm like this one. Although given that it is 2020 and we're still trying to survive this pandemic, it is nice to see New York bustling with people getting ready for the holidays. The major difference between Spider-Man and Miles Morales is there's a lot less to do now. As a reminder, this game does retail for $50 and is meant to be a bit smaller in scope than the first game. There are far fewer tasks to complete, crimes to stop, and collectibles to gather. That's not to say they're not there, but there's just a lot less of them. But just like the first game, everything that is in Miles Morales is expertly crafted and a pure joy to play. I can't overemphasize how much the combination of heart, story, and enjoyable gameplay come together into a cohesive package. Insomniac did a great job of making this a Miles Morales game. There are beautiful flourishes of music, superb voice acting, and just enough changes to make it feel like a different game. When you're swinging throughout Manhattan, which is still perfection, you can now have Miles perform tricks as if this were a game of Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Miles also has a beautiful set of costumes to unlock, including the one I played with for about 75% of the game, his suit from Into the Spider-Verse. Miles also has a new arsenal of gadgets and moves at his disposal that make for some engaging and memorable set pieces. One of the areas that I think is improved by the smaller scope is that you don't have too many moves and gadgets to use. There are just enough that I found myself actually using them all during fights instead of just relying on one or two. Insomniac has a history of knowing how to introduce weapons and combat mechanics, and it feels like Miles Morales might be their sweet spot. There were moments where combat almost felt like a symphony, with all sorts of moves and gadgets coming together to make something magical. Without repeating myself and filling up pages and pages on what this game is and how it accomplishes what it sets out to do, let me wrap up by saying, regardless of this being a PlayStation 5 launch title, it is a phenomenal game. I'm not all that steeped into Spider-Man lore, but when I finished this game, I turned to my spouse and said, I don't want another Spider-Man game. I want Spider-Man 2 to be a Miles Morales adventure. This character, this world, is what I'm here for, and I hope to be swinging as Miles again soon because this first entry is something truly special. DarkStation gives Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales 5 stars.